You're tuning into the Journey to Your Best Self podcast, where we explore the past holistic well-being, personal growth, and living a fulfilling life. Each episode, we bring you insightful conversations, practical tools, and inspiring stories to help you integrate your mind, body, and spirit on your journey to becoming your best self. Let's dive in and embark on this journey together. Welcome back to the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian O'Neill, alongside my sister, clinical hypnotherapist, certified life coach, and yoga instructor, Tara O'Neill. Today, we're excited to introduce a guest with a great story and insights who are sure to inspire all of our audience on their journey to self-discovery. Joining us today is Urmi Hossain, a passionate advocate of women's empowerment, personal growth, and cultural identity. As a Bengali-Italian woman navigating multiple cultures, Urmi has a unique perspective on embracing diversity and overcoming challenges. She's dedicated to empowering others through her writing and mentorship, helping women find their voice and live authentically. Today's episode, we're going to explore Urmi's experiences, the lessons she's learned along the way, and how she uses her platform to inspire others. Get ready for a heartfelt conversation about navigating cultural complexities, personal growth, and the power of embracing your true self. So let's dive in. Urmi, welcome aboard.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, just right off the bat, it's clear that you have a passion that you've been following through for women's empowerment. And as the only man on this episode, I guess I'm the one who should start asking that question. Can you just kind of take us back a little? What life experience kind of sparked this passion? Was there something that happened with you? Was there a moment in experience? Was there a mentor, a figure that embodied in you this quest and this journey to kind of fulfill your responsibility? Or just tell us how it all started and how did you become so passionate about it?
It basically starts from my own personal story. I was born and raised in Italy, and both of my parents are Bengali. And both of my parents, they of course wanted me to be, the typical Bengali girl. However, as I was growing up, I felt like there was a lot of limitation on how much a woman could do. And I grew up with this thought that, women cannot do this. Women, they're not talented enough. They don't have enough skills. It's only the men who can, bring the breadwinner. It's only the men who can be the breadwinner and not the women. And I've seen, especially when I went back to Bangladesh to visit my parents' country, how women are treated. A lot of families, when they have a daughter, they usually feel like, it's I don't want to say they see it as a sin, but usually they tend to feel a little bit more upset because it's not a boy, but it's a girl. And that's because they usually see women sort of like a financial burden. And we do have still this issue back in Bangladesh of child marriages where young girls, especially when they are 13, 14, 15, they're given away to marriages because of this burden that a lot of family see. And because of how I've seen it as I was growing up when I visited my parents' country, and also because how I was, seen as, you cannot do this because you're just a girl. This is why I started to do the things that I do right now. This is why I joined different organizations. This is why I mentor a lot of young girls. This is why I am part of Women in Leadership. I am part of the Femme Influence organization because I think we need to change this narrative. And, unfortunately, I still see this, especially in the South Asian community. I still see this as, women are not given enough tools to be educated. Usually, like if a family has, a boy and a girl as children, as kids, usually it's the boy who is given, favoritism. Usually it's the boy who gets all the education, and women usually are neglected. They're seen as, being the caregiver, seen as being in the kitchen, taking care of kids, their family. And unfortunately, it's sad, it's sad. And that's why I decided to join these organizations to change this going forward.
Wow, that's so beautiful. You're so well spoken. I know it sounds maybe like a silly question, but how did you find your voice? How did you start? Were you inspired? Did it come naturally? Did you have to work at it? Was it after a certain event in your life? Do you mind expanding on that?
Yes, I would definitely say it was an accumulation of different events. I definitely used to speak a lot to a lot of my friends and coworkers about all this passion and interest that I had about changing the world. And I know I'm saying changing the world, which is a big thing, but I am very ambitious and I like to think big. And I remember like always talking about this with a lot of my friends. I'm like, I want to change this. I want to make things better. And it was an accumulation of a lot of like conversation, open dialogues that I had with friends. But also I got inspired by other women around me. Like I follow several celebrities who do a lot of humanitarian work, and I would watch their TED talk. I would watch their speeches. I would see the work, the humanitarian work that they were doing. And I always told myself, this is exactly what I want to do. And so I'm going to give you one concrete example. I very much enjoy Meghan Markle. I like the work that she does. I think she really does a lot when it comes to giving back to the community. And I listened to one of her speeches at the United Nations where she says, you know, we have to give the voice to the voiceless. And it was this particular moment when she said that particular statement that it just, you know, gave me a drive that this is exactly what I have to do. I have to do the same thing that she's doing, like give the voice to the voiceless. And after watching that TED talk, I told myself that speech, I told myself that I have to start from somewhere. And this is where I started to, you know, look and navigate over the internet if there were like organizations that I could join. I actually started very first time I started with mentoring. Like I joined an organization where they had mentor programs where I could actually mentor young talents and young female, and I can help them to find confidence. So I started with mentoring, and then little by little, as I started to get a little bit of more confidence, as I started to see that I was able to, you know, give back the way I wanted to give back, I wanted to like scale it up a little bit, and that's how I looked for other organizations like Women in Leadership, or even like a small organization where I volunteer for like for shorter projects. And so I was open to different opportunities because I felt like every opportunity was a chance for me to make a change.
Wow, that's so inspirational. One thing that pops out, you mentioned until you got more confidence. Standing here, your energy definitely exudes confidence in a very healthy and admirable way. What about people that say to themselves, you know, oh, I'm just not that confident. Like, oh, you know, I wish I had more confidence. I wish I could do this. They maybe have a low self-image or self-esteem. Like, where can they start? Where would you suggest they begin?
You know what? I can tell you a little bit how I did it with myself. And I'm a big book lover. So I actually started with books. I read a lot of self development books and I read a lot of motivational books. And that's how I started to see this is where I started to get my confidence from, you know, like a lot of motivational books, you know, they teach you how you can achieve your things, how you can achieve your goals, how you can find purpose. And that's how I started. And I told myself that if I want to achieve the things I want to achieve, especially because I dream big, I better, you know, get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And this is my motto. Like I live by that. Like I told myself that I know that anything I want to do in life, it's going to be uncomfortable. I know that I'm going to make mistakes. I know that maybe I might be judged. I know that people might laugh at me, but I'm ready to take all of that because I think I went over the hurdle that, you know what, if I want to achieve something, I need to make mistakes. And I think success comes from making mistakes. It comes from healthy failures. And I also did not care too much about people's opinion because I told myself that if I leave based on people's opinion, I will always be like sitting in my bubble. I will never grow personally. And so I would say my very first step was really by books. And then I also had trusted people that I could speak with, and they would encourage me to pursue my things. So I was like, you know what? I do have like a group of cheerleaders who are like cheering for me. So let me just go and try things.
That's so beautiful. Can you give, we usually ask this more towards the end, but so since we're on the topic of books, one book for our audience that you would recommend, it could have been something that inspired you, something that you learned, something that was really near and dear to your heart along your journey. Just any one particular. I know you probably have dozens. That's the problem with this question is I don't always, warn people. They're like,
that's the problem. It's a very tough question, but I can tell you one that is coming in my mind right now, which is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I very much enjoyed that book. Like I do think that if you wanna like achieve your goals, it starts by little habits, little action that you take on an everyday basis. And there is an expression like eat an elephant one bite at a time or something like that. Which I think I don't remember if it was in the book, but I think about like when I think about that expression, I think about that book. And so for me, Atomic Habits was a very beautiful and transformational book. I highly recommend it. It is a big book, but you can read it pretty quickly because it's really well written. And for anyone who's looking for a new book for the new year, since the year is gonna end in 2 months, I definitely suggest that this is your book to go.
Yeah, that's such a great suggestion. They mentioned habit stacking in that book. Can you give our audience just like one of your little habit stackers tips that you'd personally do and would maybe suggest?
Well, for me, there's so many. That's like I always feel like this is such a tough question, but like for me, like when I think about habits, and one thing that I'm also currently working on is when it comes to language learning, and I am currently working on improving my Spanish. And one thing that I started to do is actually to do Spanish a little bit every day. That whether it's through conversation, whether it's by watching YouTube videos, whether it is by listening to podcasts. So I actually am pretty consistent with that. Like I try to make sure that I'm doing this every week, so that it accumulates and it helps me to improve my it helps me to improve with my Spanish. So that's something that I've been working on for a while, and I can definitely see that it's helping me. It's because I have this habit of actually working towards that. So that's one of them, and I've been keeping up with it. And the second thing that I've been doing lately is journaling. At the beginning, I used to journal like once in a while, but now I actually sit down every day for 5 minutes and actually journal about my day. And I think it helps me to, deal with like stress. It helps me to, be a little bit less anxious. It helps me to sleep better. And I know that a lot of people see, for instance, like with the example of journaling, they do see it as sort of like a burden. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to like write about my day 5 days, like for 5 minutes. But honestly, it's really not that bad. It's you just have to really sit down for 5 minutes or less time, and then you will see the long-term benefits the more you do it. So I highly suggest for anyone who wants to start on a goal, it really takes 5 to 10 minutes per day. It does not take that long if you want to make a change in your life.
Yeah. And you could sorry, just real quick, you could you could journal in Spanish and then read it out loud and practice your Spanish, and you got 2 of them done.
Exactly.
So no, but we are big fans of consistency as well. So thank you for sharing those. Those are really great. I mean, very helpful for our audience. I love how you said with the Spanish, you're doing it, every day, but you're changing it up a little bit, right? So, maybe you're not bored by just looking at the same, video over and over. Maybe you'll incorporate it different, but the main key is that consistency, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
So can you talk a little bit about your love for language learning? And you already have several that you're fluent in, that you've kind of mastered, and now you want to add another one. What's the reason behind that?
So here's the thing. Some languages, they were given to me. I did not have a choice. And some others, I had to learn them because I had to. And then some others, I chose to learn them. So here's the thing. When it comes to Bengali, which is my mother tongue, I had to learn it because that's a language that my parents taught me when I was a kid. But then I also say that Italian is my adopted mother tongue because since I was born in Italy and I grew up in Italy, I started to pick up Italian much faster than Bengali, and I actually introduced Italian at home. So I started to use it with my sister, and time to time I would actually throw like Italian words to my parents when we would speak Bengali. And then at school, they basically made us teach English, French, and German. Although German, I don't actually consider it a language that I know because I completely forgot it. So English and French, I had no choice. I had to learn them. And now because I live in Quebec, I live in Montreal, I use English and French on a daily basis. I use English. I actually have studied university in English and I'm working in French. And I did not have much of a choice at this point. Like I need to use the language to survive. And with the Spanish, it actually was my choice. I love everything when it comes to, the Spanish culture, the Latino culture. Like I just love the sound of the Spanish language. And so that Spanish is the language that I'm actually currently working on. I always tell people I can speak 4.5 languages, 0.5 being the Spanish. And I'm hoping that eventually I can tell people I can speak 5 languages. But my passion is for languages. I think it was just I don't know. I always think it was just a talent or something. I just very much enjoy like being able to switch from one language to another. I can see how people in Montreal, they do it a lot between English and French, like they just switch to English to French just as if it was nothing. They speak French and they throw English words. They speak English and they throw French words. And now I feel like I'm doing the same thing. And sometimes I see myself switching like among 3 languages as well, like between like English, Italian, and also like Bengali when I'm speaking with let's say family or relatives. So yeah.
Do you feel like you kind of connect on like when you're speaking their tongue that they're used to, their native tongue? Can you make a deeper connection with the people that you work with?
If we can call it a deeper connection, I think it's more because I have to, like because I don't have a choice, like because I serve like a Quebecois clientele, I have to speak with them in the language that it's more comfortable with them, for them. But for me, I feel like I always have a deeper connection when I'm speaking in Italian, like with let's say I'm meeting like Italian people for the first time, or when I'm talking with my Italian friends. This is where I feel like I am just myself, where I feel like I can be myself and I can connect on a deeper level with them. So I feel like for some languages, it's because I need to speak that language to communicate. But for me, if we talk about deeper connection, it's always Italian.
That's really interesting. How about in terms of non verbal language? Can you talk to some of the things that you do or what you notice people do when they don't maybe understand how to say something? Are there universal expressions? You know how people say like you can smile with your eyes, or you can tell when somebody's welcoming, even if they don't have a particular, even they don't say words, or they don't have a particular um, intent that you're aware of. Can you speak to the body language, or have you become more intuitive by doing all of this work?
I do observe a lot. I actually do. I am someone who likes to observe things. And so I am part of the Toastmasters Club, which is it's a nonprofit organization for public speaking. So here's the thing, they teach about body languages. And so I learned a lot about body language based on those meetings that we had about, learning public speaking. So I do pay attention when people speak to me normally. I do pay attention to their smile. I do pay attention about how they move their arms. I do pay attention about their posture. And yes, there are some body languages that are a bit more welcoming compared to someone who's just sitting like that with their arms crossed. That's when you know that they don't want to have any sort of like engagement. So I'm able to pick up some of the cues based on how people are using their body language to communicate with you. So I am a bit more observant in that sense. One thing I can definitely tell you is that Italians are known to use hand gestures. So here's the thing. I didn't know about this before I moved to Canada. Like I didn't know that this is what we were known for. And then when I came to Canada, I tend to use a lot my hands, and people were always telling me like she cannot talk without moving her hands, and I'm actually moving them now. But it's because I have to emphasize my, my message, so I have to move my hands. So I always see myself like especially in Canada, like when I'm talking to someone, I'm the one who's like using her hands and moving around all the time. And so like I'm a bit more aware about myself as well, because I was not aware that this is what we were known for. And now when I watch, let's say, Italian shows, I can see how like, Italians are always moving their hands. It's so true. But this is how we communicate, that's, we have to express our emotion this way. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share.
I love that. In yoga, especially, the hands are the extension of the heart, right? And so I do feel as though people with passion and fervor and that are really embodied tend to speak with their hands. So I really love that. Thank you for sharing.
Well, just a quick one from me while we're on Italian stereotypes. Is that why you ended up in Montreal? Because it was the only place to get good food in Canada.
No.
And I'm just kidding to the Canadian listeners out there. We love you here. But I mean, that was kind of a saving grace, right? Because that is kind of where you can get so much great cuisine in Canada. And coming from Italy, it can be lacking in some of the more remote places, let's be honest, in Canada.
You know what? Montreal has definitely a very European touch. I can definitely say that. I love how it's so multicultural. Like I've been to Quebec City, I've been to Ottawa, I've been to Toronto, I've been to Calgary. But Montreal gives you a special feeling that other cities do not give you. And definitely because I think of the French influence, it does have that French European vibe. And it's nice to see that. We do have a lot of different type of restaurants, Italian being one. But I would say the most beautiful thing about Montreal is that it does celebrate its diversity. One thing that they do in the summer is actually organize different festivals. So you have the Italian Festival Week, which happened in August, and this is to celebrate the Italian culture. You also have the Asian Week, so they have like you can go to festival and try Asian cuisine. You have the Greek festival. So basically, they have festival from different countries because they want to celebrate the diversity of what the city is able to offer. I can definitely tell you one thing about Montreal is that I was very much surprised about how many Italians are in Montreal. Like, I feel like anywhere I go, I have to be careful about what I'm saying because some way or the other, someone speaks Italian, and it was nice. It's nice to see it, but it's nice and weird at the same time because I meet people who are Italian and I tell them I'm also Italian, but they look at me and be like, but we don't look alike, like you look like not Italian. And I have to tell them a little bit about my history, how I was born and raised there. And I always end up speaking to them in Italian, but then I realized that there are people who are actually born in Montreal. So they don't know much of the language. They don't have that much of an attachment the way I had it when I was growing up in Italy. So I feel like it's the other way around because in Italy, it was like I was the one who was, let's say, my parents are immigrants. So I was the one who was the kid of immigrant family. And here it's the other way around. It's like Italians who moved from Italy to Canada. And these are basically Italian people who are kids of Italian immigrants. And so it was nice to see how like there are so many Italians in Montreal.
Excellent. All right, a couple of things there. One is you talked about the kind of the different cultures in Canada. There's so many Asians, right? East Asians and South Asians that move to Canada, right? Yes. It's a huge part of the population. What's it about the foundational parts of the Canadian culture and society that draw people from that part of the world there, do you think?
I think it's probably a better opportunity, better lifestyle, because I also know, like, I'm also someone who moved from Italy to Canada, and that's for me, like, my main reasoning was there were some personal reasons there, but also when I think about, going back to Italy, it doesn't cross my mind that I want to go back to Italy right now. I just feel like Canada does have a lot of benefits, social benefits. There is a lot of job opportunities. I think there is a better lifestyle. It does have its drawback, like when you think about the weather, it's not the best weather. It gets really cold, dark days, long
Sure.
winters, those are the drawbacks.
Sure.
But in a sense, I feel like from outside, people see Canada as paradise. I can definitely tell you this because even when I was in Italy and you tell people, oh, I live in Canada, like people would be like, oh my gosh, you live in Canada? That's such a paradise. And it is perceived like that. And if you think about Canada, it is a very friendly and calm place, like compared to other parts of the world. Like I feel like the States make so much news, but it's like it's fun at the same time, but compared to Canada, but I feel like Canada is it's much calmer in that sense. So there's a lot of opportunities to create a better life, to live well. You get all these benefits that I feel like other countries are not able to give the same way as Canada does.
Gotcha. Yeah, the cultural differences are just so fascinating, and the similarities. I want to keep going back there. You talked about some of the expectations that your parents had for you growing up, and I want to delve a little deeper into maybe the reason that they kind of held those views. Do you think a lot of the reasons that women throughout societies are held to a different expectation and something that can kind of really limit where they can go, is that generational? Is it because of, conservative values
Yeah.
from historical perspectives? Is it cultural? Is it from the culture? Is it religious? Is it societal? What do you think is the main driver in that limitation that's out there?
Definitely not religion. I think a lot of people mix religion with culture. It's definitely not religion, but I remember being believed that it was because of religion, but it's not. As I grew up, I realized that it was never about religion. It's about culture, and people, tend to blame religion for a lot of things, but it's actually about culture, societal expectations, and also it's something that it's coming back from generation. I think, unfortunately, because it's a very conservative, it's very conservative, the whole like South Asian culture, and it's something that it's also very hard to change. And so people are just going forward with the things, with how things are. So because, for instance, I can give you an example. Arranged marriages, like they still happen. They still happen. I'm not saying they're a bad thing, but because they happened in the past, no one ever said anything bad about it. They still happen. Same thing with child marriages. I some people think it's okay to have child marriages. I think it's wrong because I don't think any kids should be given away to marriage at such a young age. And so it's a very close-minded mentality, and it's very, very hard to change it. And I feel like in some parts of the world, like I can give an example, like in United Kingdom, there is a big, big community of South Asian people. And unfortunately, sometimes I feel like people in United Kingdom from that community are actually going backward instead of going forward with things. And it's very hard to change. I feel like if you stay within the community, you will always conform to what the community thinks is right, even though it's not necessarily the right thing. You basically follow everyone. You just follow the crowd. Whatever the crowd is doing, you think is the right thing. And so it's just a mentality is very, very, very hard to change. People are not willing to accept change. I can, even interracial marriages, it's a big no, no, no. Like it's you cannot marry outside of your religion, your country. Sometimes even outside, even if it's from the same country, but if it's a different community within the same country, it's a big no, no, no. And that's because I think people care a lot about what will people say. It's a lot about reputation. People care so much about reputation that they don't want their reputation to be ruined by someone doing something bad, which is not necessarily bad. It's just different. I can also say that we're in 2024 and the next generation are making some changes, but it does come with a cost. I also have seen people being disowned by their family because they were taking a different path. So it's hard. Change is hard. For a lot of people, it's very hard.
Yeah, that's well put and thought very thoughtful. Tara.
You are a very wise woman, and I tend to agree in terms of the cultural challenges of whether or not my personal views align with it. We can all see that it's slow, right? It is it can be a very slow change. Do you think that they that the notion that there's ancestral trauma within our body and our bloodlines, do you think that gives us some hope, especially to people that are a little resistant to change? They can now see, like, this is documented, like there's a reason that things have been a certain way, and maybe we don't have to do them the same. Maybe we don't have to struggle. Maybe we can break the cycle. So is that a conversation that's being had with the younger generation? And how do you speak to women about that and breaking the cycle, breaking free without being maybe disowned or something more extreme?
Okay, let me tell you this. When it comes to, healing from your traumas, it depends who you're speaking with. Because if you're speaking of people of my parents' generation, there is no way you can break this cycle, because no one thinks about trauma as an actual issue. So no one ever have this kind of dialogues, traumas, mental health issues. Like, no one ever talks about it because it's not an issue. It's not an issue. So healing people from my parents' generation, forget it. There is no way. It's a lost case. But when it comes to the next generations, like mine and even the one afterwards, yes, there are conversations being held. Like, I've met a lot of South Asian women who actually go and speak with therapists to talk about their traumas, how, these things that happen to them in their life. I also do that with my friends. I talk about, all these episodes that happen in my life, and I feel like it was not normal. And when I speak about them, I start to realize that, what, I wasn't crazy to think that way. It's normal to have these conversations. And I do think that the next generation is trying to make the future better by healing themselves. They're trying to heal themselves so that they can, teach the next generation that it's good to, fix all these traumas that you had as a kid, which have definitely impacted your life, but you're not, abnormal because you had those, those type of thoughts. And so I've been to a lot of podcasts, and I have spoken to a lot of South Asian women, and everyone is doing this kind of inner work about themselves, trying to heal, trying to learn to unlearn, that type of concept, because I think it's important that we teach the next generations that, it's okay to feel that way, but it's also okay that we try to solve all these issues. And I feel like there's a bit more awareness, and there's a more conversation. People are more open now to talk about mental health, because before it was like a big taboo, like no one talks about this. It's this an actual issue? Like, because you don't see it, people don't think it's an issue. No one ever talks about depression, anxiety, and I'm pretty sure everyone, anxiety, everyone pretty sure has it. Depression, you might have different, forms of depression, but no one ever talks about this thing, which is sad, because it's an actual real problem. And I've seen a lot how this is a problem in the South Asian community.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you made a point to say, like, and then there's nothing wrong with you, right?
Yeah.
So we can have these conversations, speak how we feel, and it not be pathological, right? Like,
Yeah.
there doesn't have to be shame, blame, guilt, and so while I do agree with you about our maybe older generation, maybe our parents' generation, definitely the grandparents' generation. What I do see though is maybe they're not going to therapy or they're not necessarily doing the work, but they are accepting of the younger generations doing it to some extent. So we can give them like a little bit of credit there for some people. So it's like, you take what you can get. At least they're not like hopefully, maybe they might not be doing it, but at least, baby steps. They're starting to be accepting of, okay, yeah, my grandchild needs to go, speak to somebody or whatever it might be. So I do think that, and that's huge. Like, please keep the conversation going. Now, where do you recommend people, like, say they've read the books, but maybe they're not quite ready to talk about it, or they don't even know where to talk about it? Where do you recommend people, specifically women that are a little hesitant? They're starting to tiptoe. How can we get them to reach out even further? Are there groups? Are there clubs? Are there associations? Their websites? I mean, I know you have a lot of resources. Where do they take that next step?
So if we talk about like healing from traumas, if you're still in that topic, I do highly recommend, talking to a therapist. But I also feel like talking to a therapist is like going on a date. Like you have to find the right person. And it's always very, very hard to find the right person that you feel like they're understanding you. Because I feel like even when I spoke the first time to a therapist, I did not feel like I was being understood. And there was also like a cultural barrier there. So it's like you have to go around to find the right person. And the good thing I would say, especially for someone who works like for a corporate job, is that you have companies actually covering those costs. So it's like you want to see a therapist, we will cover you the cost. And some companies also offer like free sessions, like you can have like up to 5 for free, and then they will cut then for the next ones you pay or they pay you partially. And so that's a good point to start. Yes, there are also organizations that you can join, but even finding an organization, again, it's sort of like going for shopping. Like you have to find the right group of people, like you thrive when you find the right circle of people, and you need to make sure that you're trusting these people. I have a lot of friends that I can trust, but it also took me a while to build that trust because not everyone could understand me. So it's also trial and error. I feel like, it's like there is cultural barrier, how you grow up, where you grow up does impact who you choose to have in your life. Ethnical diversity is also part of it. So it's it's a trial and error. You have to find the right person that you can trust to speak up about these things. Definitely friend is it's another resource to try, organizations, and of course therapy.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I want to actually reiterate that is your employer, can give you these benefits. Go to HR, be your own advocate. If they say, oh, or insurance is like, well, we'll cover 4 sessions. It's like, no, that's not okay. Like that we do have to take a stand, and the resources are out there, and there are people that will help. Just don't get discouraged if you get a no. Like, there are other options, right? So I love that message, because it is a necessity in our modern world that we take care of our mind, body, and spirit. That being said, do you have a spiritual practice? Do you have a routine, prayer, meditation, gratitude, anything like that you incorporate into your daily life?
So definitely journaling, as I mentioned before. And I always I always tell myself a lot of positive words. Like I actually write like positive self-affirmation, especially when I have to do something and I don't have that confidence that I need. And so I keep writing it a couple of times until it's like in my head. And then I know that my day, like I actually get that confidence, and then I tell myself it's going to be all good. And it does happen to be that way afterwards. When I reflect upon my day, it is like that. So I usually like write a lot of self-affirmation words or sentences. I do think the self-affirmation sentences are very transformational. That's one thing I do that when I'm like nervous, and I try to do it on a daily basis. But another thing that I do is I have mantras, like on my phone, especially my wallpaper is a mantra because, I see myself as a superhero, superwoman. So if I want to achieve something, I always go back to that mantra that I wrote on my phone. It says, I can actually read it out to you if you
I was
want.
just going to say, if you don't mind, can you read your
Yeah,
current
I actually
mantra?
have
Because
to.
that's
I have
really
to.
helpful.
I have to.
Do
So
it.
this one, it says, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. That's the first one. And then the second one, it says, some women fear the fire, some women simply become it. And so
that is power.
yeah, so I like, those are like, for me, when I forget, if I want to do something or if I'm not feeling confident enough, I always go back to that and I try to remind myself like who I am as a person. I try to be this invincible woman who's able to conquer everything, who's not afraid of anything. And so this is how I try to lead my life, lead my days.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
excellent. Yeah, that reminded me of another thing that I had wanted to ask you before that. You've talked about kind of technology and using your phone, social media, YouTube, the wallpaper. How do you use that to help you grow and develop and then not get distracted by so much nonsense, kind of externals that just mindless scrolling, right? You said you found some great things by some thought leaders that you had followed and watched some videos, but there's also a lot of stuff that is not going to help you and help you develop and grow and nourish you. So is it just willpower, or is there something that you do that, you're using tech and you're so busy, you're using your free time to kind of keep you on the right track?
I will simply tell you one thing. It's self-discipline. This is what it's helping me to do the things I want to do. It's helping me to control my time, to manage my time, especially because I do have a very, very busy schedule, because, I am committed to all these organizations and I run my own things, my YouTube channel, I write ebooks, books, things like that. But I cannot do any of these things if I'm not a disciplined person. And I do believe that discipline is a key trait that any person should have in order to achieve their things, in order to achieve their goals, to be successful, because it's easy to fall into the trap of your phone. It's very, very, very easy, unfortunately. But I also remind myself my why, like I write down my goals. I go back to my why. I want to achieve things. I'm a go-getter as a person. I try to go and I go after my goals. And so when I see that I'm spending too much time on certain things and I'm not using my time efficiently, I go back to my why and I try to stick to it. So I'm a very disciplined person, and I think discipline is fundamental for anyone to be successful in life.
That's awesome. One of the last things for me, how can we leave some of the younger women in the audience and younger men and just kind of everyone listening? How do they go about finding their why, especially when they're in a challenging situation and I don't use this word lightly, but maybe oppressed in some way, or really they have things stacked against them. They're caring for siblings. They're in a situation where they have an authoritarian household. They might not think they have the opportunities, a lower income situation. Is it education? Is it kind of connecting with a group of like-minded people? What should they do to kind of get started, go and become an Urmi or become somebody that can break, kind of your story may have been written a different way if you didn't do certain things. So where can they take their first step? What would you say to a lot of the girls listening out there and the boys too?
Start by prioritizing yourself. And I know it's easy to say, but I feel like for a lot of people who don't believe in themselves, who don't have the time, who are so, consumed by their daily routine, you can make a change if you put yourself first in the list. And it goes back to, what we said before, building habits by, taking small actions every day. For me, especially, it was, talking to people, exploring different things until I was comfortable, but also like journaling your thoughts, writing down the things that come to your mind. Just their thoughts, but then they give you time to reflect upon them. And I'm someone who likes to write goals. And you don't need to have 10 goals. You can have one or two and see if you can actually achieve those goals. You give yourself a challenge that by the end of the year, I'm going to do this and that. And it could be just simply two things so that you're not feeling overwhelmed. And I think that the moment you achieve those goals, then you get a boost of confidence. So it helps you to push harder, to do new things. And I think it's a build up. Basically, it's just gonna come with time, because it's a long process, I think, to find your why. It's not something that is meant to be overnight, but it's something that it's a work in progress until you find your why. And I do think that your why also can change. Like you do some things, and after 10 years you find out that you have more passions. And I think that's more than normal. Like life is about trying different things and finding happiness in the little things that we do. And so that would be my advice.
Yeah, that's and it's wonderful advice. In that, a couple points that you made, if you don't put yourself first, how are you going to know what your own why is, right? So sometimes our why isn't, which is fine, right? Because a lot of times it is by nature to help other people, but we want to make sure that it's the perception of our why is worded in a way that we're in control of it ultimately, so we'll have a better outcome. So that was, so I'm not even gonna, I'm gonna have listeners just re-listen to that because it was so good. But I agree. Your why is also going to change, and it can be multifaceted, and revisit. I mean, really, you are the ultimate, journey to your best self, archetype avatar, because you do all the things. I mean, you really, everything that you said, we preach, we share, and so you've done such a wonderful job in your life, in your career, and your work to embody this mind, body, spirit. So thank you for all the work that you do, the people you've helped, and the people that you are going to help in the future. It's a beautiful thing. Where can people find you? How can they work with you? How can they learn from you? Your website, your social media, etc.
Yes. So I have a LinkedIn profile. It's called Urmi Hossain. I have a YouTube channel called Urmi Hossain. I have my blog called myways.ca. And then I have, the two organizations that I volunteer for. One of them is called Women in Leadership. And the second one is called Femme Influence. So people can find more about the work that we do, how we serve the community, how we help women, right on those two websites. And we also have a mentor application program open right now at the Women in Leadership organization, where women, they can be mentor or mentee, and they can sign up right now. So that's a great opportunity for people to connect with the community, to learn from other women. So that's also, it's happening right now. And then I have my Instagram account called Urmi.
That's amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. We've learned so much. Our audience members are definitely going to get a lot out of this episode. Please do stay in touch. Hopefully this is the start of a relationship that, will be beneficial for everyone involved. We'll do this again.
Yes. Thank you so much again. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. We appreciate you being part of this community. For more resources, insights, and ways to connect, head over to youroneself.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and Overcast. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, keep aligning your mind, body, and spirit, and peace, love, and self-discovery.